All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified live stream. And today we're going to be going through a few different kind of tutorials, lessons I want to teach you guys on some PR topics. We're not going to have a lot of media that we're working with today. This is mainly just going to be me talking, sharing some information, some advice. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so first up, we're going to talk about one critical mistake that most people make with PR and how to avoid making it yourself. Now, this particular mistake is far easier than you realize, and it is basically making the story about yourself, right? Obviously, if a journalist is interviewing you for your story, right, they're talking about your background, then that's a different story. That's a different situation entirely. But what I'm talking about is whether you're pitching or whether you're, being quoted, whatever the situation is, if you're making it about yourself, you're going to have a really hard time and things are going to go sideways for you. And when I said this is an easier mistake to make than most people realize, what I mean is it's not just what you say, but it's how you position yourself. It's how you phrase things. It's basically every detail of your answers. So the way that we solve this problem is everything needs to come from the perspective of, first, the audience, right? The audience is the only person that matters at this stage, right? Everything that you say has to be useful and valuable for them. Why is that? Well, think about it from the media's perspective. They're running a media outlet catering towards that audience. They're providing content for them. And in order for the media outlet to succeed in business, they have to keep their audience coming back. So that audience has to find the information that they're consuming valuable. So the way we do that is we focus on providing value to that audience first and foremost. Now, what I mean by that is when you're answering a question, that question needs to tell them how to do something, how to achieve something, how to avoid something, things like this. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but everything has to come from their perspective. After the audience, then you have to cater to the needs of the editor or the producer. Now, for most of you, if you're pitching a journalist, you're pitching an anchor, you're probably not going to meet the editor. You're probably not going to engage with the editor or the producer for that matter, because they're more behind the scenes. They're on the back end between the audience and that journalist or that anchor. So if you've got a publicist, of course, they will be the ones who meet that editor, they meet that producer, they have a relationship with them. But if you're doing it yourself, you're probably not going to encounter the editor or the producer all that often. The next person that comes in this equation is that journalist or that anchor, right? Whoever it is that's going to be asking you the questions, and then that story goes out under them, right? Whether it's an article that's being published somewhere like Entrepreneur, or the Wall Street Journal, or your local TV station, or not TV station, let's say local newspaper, or it's a TV segment where, could be national, could be local, where that anchor, that host is interviewing you. That's under their segment. That's their content, right? So the journalist or the anchor comes next in the equation. So you need to think about what they need. And what is it they need? Well, they need for people to consume their content, right? Journalists and anchors, they are rated on the type of volume of audience they bring to the equation, right? If people are not interested in what they're saying, people are not interested in the stories that they're telling, then they're going to lose their job pretty quickly. So you have to frame it from that perspective as well. So this is a great opportunity to work in some controversy from time to time. And that's something we'll talk about a little bit more in this segment as well. And then, unfortunately, you are the last person in this equation. Your needs matter the least. What you want out of this is the absolute last in the entire equation. So when you get it wrong, when you do end up putting yourself first and you pitch things wrong or you answer things wrong, the best case is you get ignored, right? They ignore your pitch or they don't include you in that piece. But the worst case scenario is, you do get that interview, but then you don't get featured. And this wastes your time. But more important than that, if it's bad enough, if you handle this poorly enough, it burns that relationship. And that can have an even wider impact because I've mentioned this before a bunch of times. In the media, a lot of people, they talk, right? And it's because, of course, they're trying to do their jobs as best as they can. So they want to know who are the best sources, who are the worst sources, and who to avoid, who to seek, right? So if you're getting it wrong, there's a good chance that somebody's going to mention this in other conversations or in private groups that you guys never see. There's even cases where there's media blacklists of people not to feature because they're not great at bringing value to the audience, or they're rude to the journalists, or various other reasons. But this is what you have to think of in every engagement, every communication with a journalist. So obviously, this starts at the pitch. I was talking to a podcast host not too long ago, and this was in a group setting in one of the mastermind groups I'm in. And something he said is something that I hear from so many journalists, which basically is, he's so sick of people reaching out to pitch him. And it's like me, right? They'll reach out and they'll say, oh, well, you should feature me because I'm awesome. And, I did XYZ and I achieved this and I achieved that. And da da da. And that's the absolute opposite way that we need to approach this. When we're pitching something, we need to focus on the audience and what value that we bring to the audience. So if you've got a particular thing that that you feel a bunch of other people don't know but should know, that's what you open with, right? You're talking about how you're going to benefit their audience instead of talking about why you're so amazing. So the other side that this thing comes into play is the conversation, right? You're talking to that journalist. They're interviewing you to get your insight, to get your thoughts on a particular topic. Or they're emailing you and they're asking you for a quote on a particular thing, or they're asking you for answers to specific questions. What you have to do here is you have to give them useful or actionable information, right? This is something that they can go and implement in their life right now and benefit in some way. So this might be how to do something. There's something that we were doing a piece late last week and reached out for a quote from somebody. And basically, rather than answering in a way that brought value, what he ended up doing was basically reiterating the general tone of the article, right? Wasn't really valuable. I had to work with this person then to help them refine and get it dialed in. But this is where people go wrong, right? They're not really saying anything substantive. And in a lot of cases, it comes from the mindset of, oh, well, if I tell people what I know, if I tell people my secrets, so to speak, then people aren't going to need me and they'll just use this free information and never become a client, never become a customer. And frankly, that's all bullshit. If you're going to go through the time and effort of trying to get featured in the media, then bring real value. So, let's say you're a software developer. You might talk about exactly how to do a thing, and you might go in super, super deep detail. Look, the reality is people aren't going to use that information to cut you out of the equation in most cases because there's so many other pieces of that overall big picture that they don't have. But when you can give them a ton of information and show them exactly how to do a thing, even if they never hire you, that not only brings value to the audience, but it also demonstrates your expertise in a way that a lot of other people don't demonstrate effectively. And that then is what draws people to you. You can also talk about what not to do, right? So we talked about, showing people how to do a thing, right? But we also could talk about what not to do or what to do. There was a lot of publicity around this BOI, right? The Corporate Transparency Act stuff that eventually is apparently getting shut down, won't affect most of us as entrepreneurs. And I would bet that a lot of you don't even know what this is. And so when this came out, a friend of mine, Carol Roth, who is one of the smartest people you'll ever meet and a huge champion for the small business community, she was one of the first people to get out here and really talk about this. And she was talking about, exactly what needs to be done about this and what not to do. And, she was being very vocal about everything. And honestly, she had no play in this. She wasn't involved in filing any of this stuff. It was just a purely a thing that she was doing to support the business community. But in sharing all of this information, it really put her out there in a very big way. And a lot of people who had never heard of her, and for what it's worth, she's already got a huge platform. She's very well known. She's one of the people who you see on all the major uh, news networks talking about various financial topics all the time. But this put her into an even larger audience because she's talking about this and she's telling people everything that they need to know about this. And there was no gatekeeping. It was just, it wasn't come sign up for my newsletter to learn how. It was, here's all the answers. And she was all over the media talking about this. The other thing you can do is bring unique insight to the equation. So I'm not sure if David is on with us here, David Bell, but he runs a national drug testing company. And one of the things he's really great at is bringing industry insight that a lot of other people in that industry don't have. And so he's analyzing things. He was actually just featured in Newsmax, I think it was a week or two ago, talking about drug testing federal employees and basically connected the dots on how this is an economic issue, not just a safety issue. And it's unique insight like that that really puts you on a different level. And that's the kind of stuff journalists like to put out because it gets people talking and it gets people thinking in ways that they hadn't thought before, which then creates more eyeballs, more exposure for their content. And of course, that helps their job, right? And then predictions are a great one as well. So I had an article, God, I think this one was about 7 years ago, that I wrote for Search Engine Journal. And basically everything that you see going on right now in the search engines with this AI and Google not telling anybody how anything ranks and all the factors that we knew played a role in ranking, but Google's finally admitting, basically everything that you see in the search engine optimization industry coming from Google is stuff that I predicted, I think it was about 7 years ago. And that's the kind of stuff that people get excited about as well, both on a positive or a negative perspective, because when you're coming in with a prediction of what you think is going to happen, other people want to share their opinion on that. Now, some of them are going to come in here and they're going to talk about how, what you're saying is correct and you're very intelligent and you're forward thinking and all these great things about you. That's going to be kind of a small portion of the feedback you'll get in a lot of cases. What you will get more of, and this is actually a good thing, although it's going to sound like it's not, what you're going to get a lot more of is people telling you how stupid you are and how moronic they think your ideas are. And that's okay, because what happens is that now drives engagement. And you'll get people arguing in the comments. They'll say, oh, well, this is right. Oh, no, you're stupid and it's wrong. And he's wrong and you're stupid for agreeing with him and whatever. And that's great because that actually creates more visibility for you. And that added engagement drives more eyeballs to the media outlet, which benefits the journalists, the anchors, the editors, producers, basically everybody on that side of the equation. So this is great to do. And it's a very powerful way to handle this. So one of the things we're going to go ahead and segue into here is how to give a quote that a journalist will actually use in their story. So I mentioned earlier that this whole thing came about when I was talking to a source that we were going to cite in an article. This was something we were doing for a client, and we wanted an extra source to basically provide kind of supporting positions on a particular topic. So we brought this other person in to add a quote. Great guy, super smart, incredibly knowledgeable, and doing huge things in his industry. But he made the mistake of, when he gave this quote, it was basically just reiterating the overall topic of the article, right? It didn't really say anything of substance initially. So had to work with him, kind of coach him through that to get his real thoughts on the topic, the smaller aspect of that topic that we were focusing on in that section there, right? So generally what happens is people make one of two mistakes here. The first is saying too much. I've got a client who I love the guy to death, great guy, super smart, very gracious person, but I will schedule a 15-minute call, and it will quickly turn into, an hour and 15 minutes, because he talks and he goes in all these different tangents. And it's great. I love it personally because it gives me so much information to work with, but I cannot ever put him directly in touch with a journalist and let them directly interview him, because let's be honest, journalists don't have all day. They're going to have a very tight schedule because a lot of them are turning around a whole bunch of articles in a very short period of time. Good friend of mine was putting out, upwards of 15 articles in a day. That's insane. So this is a mistake that a lot of people make because they have so much knowledge and they really don't know how to filter and refine it and get it nice, tight, and concise. That was this guy's case. In his case, what I would do is I would get on a call with him, basically extract everything I could about a topic, and then I personally would distill it down myself. And then that's what we give to the journalists. So this is important because, like, while your story may be huge to you, it's just one of countless others to a journalist. So you need to get it really refined so that you can make it stand out. So you have to be better and you have to be different. And this is an unpopular opinion, but different is more important than better. Look at a company like Apple, right? The people who love Apple products, they love them to death. You can't convince an Apple lover that the Macintosh is not a superior computer to your generic computer you can build, or, an HP or a Dell or whatever. The reality is, if you actually look at the technical specs of a Mac, you're paying so much more for the same processing power than you will for an IBM, what we used to call an IBM compatible, basically the computers that everybody else runs who's not on a Mac, right? You're going to be running Windows on it. You're going to be, using a regular operating system. But this is where things are interesting, because being different can actually have a much more significant impact, because that's what makes you stand out. Now, the more that you say, the less credible that you seem. So you see this a lot. A good example of this is police interrogations, right? When the police are interrogating somebody, a lot of times they'll ask a question and then they'll shut up. Well, you've seen it on TV. If you haven't ever actually seen a real life police interrogation, I can promise you've seen one on TV. And to some degree, what happens on TV is based in reality. And this is one example of that. So let's say, the cop asks the criminal a question, or the suspect, because we can't call them criminals until they're convicted, I guess. But let's say the cops ask that particular suspect a question and he answers it. And then what happens? The cop will sit there and stare at him for a little while. And then he'll start offering up more information, and then just keeps going, because people have this aversion to silence. And so they want to keep talking. They want to keep sharing more and more and more information. Now, in the case of a criminal, they're doing it because they're trying to convince the cop that they're innocent. In the case of a business situation, you're doing it because you're trying to convince someone of whatever position you're sharing, right? You're trying to convince them that you have the knowledge, you have the capabilities, you are a great person to solve this particular problem for them, right? So the problem here is, in addition to it making you seem less credible, the other side is that the more that they have to sift through, the harder their job becomes, right? They have more stuff to filter through. So now they have to work harder to pick out those little gems. And all of you guys have powerful wisdom in the things you say, but you add a lot of extra fluff around the edges of it. And that makes it harder for them to extract those gems. So you need to think in tight, concise sound bites. Think of it like thinking in bullet points. Pay attention to the social cues too. If you have, if you're on a phone, it's a little bit harder. If you're on a Zoom, or if you're in person, face to face with that journalist, it's a lot easier. But take a note of what are they doing while you're talking, right? If they just keep talking and talking and talking, or I'm sorry, if you keep talking and talking and talking, and then you see them, like you're looking at them on camera, and then all of a sudden they're just kind of like, looking down, or they're just staring at you when previously they were writing notes, right? If they just stop writing notes, but you're droning on and on, that's a pretty good sign that you're not giving them anything useful. You're just wasting your breath, basically. The other thing is pay attention, listen carefully to what's going on the other end of that phone. If you hear that you're talking and you keep hearing them, right? They're taking that breath, they're about to say something, but because you don't stop, they can't actually get it out. These are signs that you need to slow down, you need to shut up and let them ask more questions. You need to just focus on the key aspects of whatever your answer is. And then if they want you to dig deeper, they will do that. Now, this, of course, is a balancing act, right? Because like I said in the quote that we set up this weekend, he really didn't provide much of anything. Now, this was purely email and DMs going back and forth, but he was on the other side of the equation in not providing enough information. Most people are on this side where they're providing too much. And it's a delicate balancing act, and most people do get it wrong. But if you get this right, if you get the balance good, and there's not going to be a perfect amount, but you're somewhere in that middle 20% of what most people are doing, you're going to be in a very good position, because that not only crystallizes your message, but it also makes you stand out, because other people aren't as clear and concise with their messaging. So you're giving them what they need, but you're also standing out because you're giving them what they need. Does that make sense? So the other thing is not saying enough. So think about it from this perspective. If you're being interviewed, they're asking you whatever they're asking you because you're supposed to be the expert. So be that for them. And to do that, you have to be useful. So don't just agree or reiterate their thoughts. You want to go deeper into that. So let's say somebody talks about this BOI thing, for example, or I talked about, Carol was the expert talking about this. Rather than just saying, here's what it is, she sat down and said, well, here's what it is, but here's why that's a problem. Here's the problems that causes for business owners. Here's the economic impact that can have for not only the business owners, but now their employees, now the market as a whole. Here's how this will affect people. Here's what it potentially takes away from businesses. Here's the lack of privacy that it creates. There's all these problems. And she went deeper and deeper and deeper into all of these tangents. And in doing so, demonstrated her expertise. So you want to give enough information that it's going to be useful. Their audience will hear it. They'll learn something from it. And that information will enable them to do something. But when you do this, you have to be original. So no one wants to hear the same shit that everyone else is already saying. So you need a fresh take. When you do this, though, it's important to remember that authenticity is key. So one way that I've seen this executed poorly is the whole SEO is dead take. And for those of you who do not know, I used to be in the SEO industry. I was routinely listed as one of the top people in that industry. And it used to irritate me seeing these SEO is dead articles or posts on social media where they would come out and declare, this is the year that SEO has died. And full disclosure, this is something that I actually have started saying recently because of how AI has basically destroyed the results. And a lot of the search engines are trying to be giving the answer rather than giving options. But I used to see, without fail, at least a few times a month, I would see somebody coming out with some variation of SEO is dead, but there was no basis for it at the time. And so initially, when that whole concept first came out, it was something that got some traction, right? It got people worked up. A lot of people come out and say, oh, yes, this guy's right, and it's going to die, and this is great, and da-da-da. And then you would have other people who would come out and say, oh, well, this guy's a moron and doesn't know what he's talking about. But because initially it was effective at creating controversy and creating word of mouth, right? People are arguing about it. People piled onto it. And then the next thing you know, it's just this thing where everyone's saying it, and it doesn't have any impact anymore. So if you're going to say something and it's going to be a kind of a controversial take, it's going to be different than what everyone else is saying, you need to actually authentically believe whatever it is you're saying. Now, If your take is not based in logic, you could lose credibility. Good example of this is Jim Cramer. Any of you guys watch, he had a TV show, I think it was on CNN, still does. And he's always making these controversial takes on various stocks, right? Oh, the market's doing this and everybody's running away, but you should go ahead and double down. Or this stock just tanked, but here's why you should buy it. Or this stock's through the roof, but you should still buy it because whatever. And in his case, it's become clear. He's been doing this for well over a decade now, I believe. But basically, pretty much everything that he says turns out to be wrong. And it's based on nonsense. It's not really based on there's no real data to back up the claims that he makes on his show. And so because of that, coupled with the fact that he's consistently wrong, it's basically kind of become a meme where whatever Jim Cramer says when it comes to investing, you want to do the opposite of that. And this is what happens when you try to be different just for the sake of being different, and that opposing take is not actually based in any kind of reality or logic or data or anything like that. So a contrarian position can actually be really powerful because controversy creates exposure. But if you're going to go down this road, you have to be ready for the hate that's going to come from it. So what happens here is when you say a thing that a lot of people may disagree with, and I've done this a lot with PR, for example. I've talked about a lot of the PR crises, and I've covered, let's say the Bud Light story, for example, when they brought on Dylan Mulvaney, that transgendered activist, as a spokesperson for the brand. And I said the brand was over with, right? I analyzed it from a PR perspective. And this was before the public sentiment started shifting from kind of this, we support this, everybody should be able to do this, and if you say anything against it, you're evil, to where now people are like, okay, yeah, this is crazy. People should not be doing this. When I said that him being a spokesperson for Bud Light was going to destroy the brand, I had so many people come out and attack me. I had people telling me that not only that I was wrong and I didn't know what I was talking about and I don't know anything and they're big enough, they'll be fine. I also had people calling me all kinds of horrible names, accusing me of being a bigot, all of these things. In reality, I turned out to be right in the end. But this is something that you're going to deal with if you're taking a controversial position on anything, and you have to be prepared for that. I personally look at it from the perspective of if you're saying a thing that you believe, you're saying a thing that you agree with, and you're saying a thing that is based in what you consider reality, then you really shouldn't be bothered by other people's criticism, right? You're doing what you think is right, or you're saying what you think is right. So other people's criticism should not really matter all that much. Now, you're a human, you're going to be affected in some way, but it should not have a huge impact on you. If you're the kind of person who does take a lot of things personally, and you will take that to heart and get upset, hurt, offended, whatever, then maybe taking a controversial position is not going to be the way to go. But if you've got that thick skin, if you're confident in who you are and what you stand for, this can be a great opportunity, because what will happen is people who share your views will then share that content to support their own views, right? If they agree with what you're saying, they're going to share it because they agree with it. And that's good. That can be super powerful from an exposure perspective. It can get you in front of more like-minded people. The other side of this is the darker side of the coin, and that is the people who will share it to criticize your views. And look, I don't care what you say nowadays. You can, say the sky is blue, and somebody's going to tell you that you're wrong, and here's why. On social media, people are going to attack you. They're going to tell you how stupid you are. And it may not even be necessarily on your profile, right? The media outlet may share the article that they wrote that quoted you saying this thing that some people don't agree with. And then those people come over to the media's post and they start arguing there, right? They're telling you how stupid they think you are. And frankly, that's going to be the case more often than the people who are supportive, because that's what the algorithms drive. And part of that is because the algorithms want to keep people active on their platforms, right? So how do we do that? Well, we do that by creating engagement, getting people going back and forth in the comments. People tend to be driven more by anger, more by negative emotions than they are by positive. And so what happens there is they'll come and tell you how stupid you are. And then someone else will come and tell them how stupid they are for thinking that you're stupid. And then that just kind of goes back and forth, and it becomes this dumpster fire of chaos. But it can be a good thing. The key here, in addition to authenticity, is to not be an ass just for the sake of being contrarian, right? Don't do a thing just because you think it's going to get a lot of people pissed off and talking about a topic. Do it because you believe in it. Do it because you think it's the right thing. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about 3 steps to build a social media presence that makes a journalist want to feature you. So why does this matter? Well, a journalist is going to look you up before they decide to feature you, right? They're not going to just take a quote from some rando and put it in an article, because if you're not actually an expert, or if you're actually a really bad person and they're featuring you, that can reflect poorly on them, which can affect their career in a negative way. So what will they find when they look up your social media profile? Are they going to find something that's going to inspire them, or is it going to cause doubt? So for most people, they have little to no social media presence, and that can cause doubt. For a much smaller subset of the entrepreneurial community, they'll find something great, right? They'll find a profile that shows them that you are an expert, or they'll find a bunch of profiles, right? Because they may look you up on multiple platforms. So the first thing we want to look at is the aesthetics for our social media profiles overall, right? And when I say aesthetics, we're talking about your profile photo, your cover photo. You've probably got a bio, or you should have a bio on any platform that allows it, a link back to your main site. And you may have some other options depending on what platforms we're talking about here. But you want those to look consistent from platform to platform to platform, so that regardless of where they are, they're going to see that it's you, and they're going to recognize it. And not only do they now see that these profiles are all the same, and you've put in the effort to be consistent across all the platforms, which shows attention to detail, it shows consistency. It also shows them that you care enough to make sure that this is all done properly, right? And then from there, we want to ensure that we've got consistent messaging across all platforms, right? So we're going to talk about, who you are, what do you do, and who do you do it for, and why do you do what you do? And that last one is actually one of the most important parts, because there's a lot of people that do what you do, and in many cases, even for the same niche. But it's not so many who do it for the same reasons that you do. For example, in my case, I know some of you guys know this story, but I used to run a full service marketing company. And then I was hit by this mystery health crisis that almost killed me. And I spent about 2 years on my deathbed and basically burned through everything we had just trying to stay alive. And I had to now get back out into the world, restart everything after I had lost everything. And what I ended up doing was leveraging public relations to put myself back on the map. And kind of a unique approach to that. I started writing some articles on my own blog, and then I used those stories to pitch other outlets to have me on to, come on podcasts, for example. Then I pitched media outlets in that industry based on those podcasts and how well they performed, to then have me write an article for those outlets, which then turned into recurring columns. And then I started getting featured in Forbes and Entrepreneur and Inc. and basically every outlet you can think of. And that's how we pivoted to PR, right? We took what I had gone through and what I had learned from going through that and began offering it to other people, because there's so many amazing people out there who are great at what they do. They provide tremendous value. They care about their clients, but not enough people know about them. Not enough people know how impactful their services or their products are. So I wanted to be the one who would help them get out into a larger audience and have a greater impact. And at the same time, also drown out some of these other people who were great at promoting themselves, but really didn't give a shit about their customers. So that's my why, right? Like I experienced this. What we do is based on my own journey. So all of you guys have a story like that. You've got something great that you've done. You've got something that you've overcome, and that all led you to doing what you're doing now. So when you can get that dialed into a nice, concise message, and that's visible on your profiles, that goes a long way in showing journalists that you're credible. And then we want to look at activity. So when I say activity, we're talking about a few different things. First is content. So you guys should be putting content out on a regular basis, and the content should be original. It's not enough to go out here and just share a bunch of stuff. You can't just say, I've got, I'm going to go grab all these cool articles and just reshare them. And that's it. That's not enough. That's you resharing stuff. It doesn't say anything about you. It doesn't say anything about your insight or your capabilities. So you have to demonstrate your expertise by giving people information that they can use. The same way that we talked about in an interview, right? You're giving them information that their audience can use. The same thing here. Your content should answer questions for your audience. It should explain to people how to do things, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. It should offer your unique insight, even predictions. And then we want to look at engagement, right? Are you getting a lot of engagement on your profiles? Are people coming over and liking your stuff? Are they coming over and commenting on your stuff? Are you commenting on other people's stuff? Can other people see that stuff in various places? Twitter's, or X, we're calling it these days. X is a great example of this, because on X, not only can I go to your profile and look at all of the tweets that you've made on your own profile, but I can also go and look at all the comments that you've left on other people's profiles, on other people's posts. And it's a great way to see who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, the type of content that you share, the knowledge and insight that you have. And then we also want to look at your network. So we're going to look at this from a few different perspectives. So the first is the quantity of your followers or your connections, right? Are they real or are they bots? I see this a lot on X. If you go and you look at somebody's profile, and let's say they've got 30,000 followers, but they tweet something and it gets 0 likes, it gets 0 comments. To me, that indicates that those followers are probably bot followers, right? They paid for them so that they would look impressive. And that, A, it shows me that nobody's really interested in their content, but B, it shows me that they're comfortable doing things that can be considered deceptive, right? They're not really honest. They're not authentic. And that's a problem. But engagement matters a lot more than your follower count. So keep that in mind. And then we want to look at the quality of followers or connections. So are there recognized names? Are you connected with a lot of other people that your audience looks up to and respects? And also then, are you connected with a lot of other large accounts? The recognized names is going to have more impact, but large accounts matter as well. And they matter for a few different reasons. One is that just social proof in general, but then 2 is the impact they can have from an algorithmic perspective. So let's say I post something and then somebody in my network with a very large following happens to see it and retweet it. That can result in exponentially more exposure than if somebody else saw it and retweeted it. And then that helps to drive further engagement. So this is really important to have recognized names that the people in your circle, the people in your audience recognize, like, and trust. But you also want to make sure you've got some good large accounts that you're connected with. And this goes a long way, both in establishing credibility, but also in helping you to grow your own network and expand your reach. And so now we're going to talk about authority signals. So there's 2 factors here. One is your reviews. On a lot of social profiles, you have the ability for people to post a review for you. This is true of Facebook pages. This is true of your LinkedIn profile. Currently, this is not something on X. I don't think it's on YouTube yet. Google business profiles is another area. I wouldn't really consider this a social profile, but it is a thing that you should put effort into. It is a thing that you should make sure you're getting reviews on, because that's something that journalists will look at, right? Are people feeling good enough about the value that you're bringing that they're taking time out of their day, their busy day, to come and post a positive review for you? And if they are, then that's great. And more is good, but substantive is better. So, an empty 5-star review, okay, that says something. But if they're like, hey, this person solved my problem. Let's say, I know Deb's on here watching us. I know she does some great coaching on the leadership side of things. Let's say somebody comes and posts a review for Deb Berger here in the chat, if you guys want to go connect with her. And let's say that somebody posts a review for her talking about how her leadership training, her leadership coaching helped them to get their business dialed in to the point where now their employees are operating more efficiently and they're being more proactive. And now profit margins have increased by 12% because of how they're acting, how the employees are operating after this leadership training that they got with Deb. That says a lot more than just a 5-star review or a 5-star review that says Deb's great and you'll love her services, right? So the more information about not only what you did, but the value that it brought, that has a huge impact for you guys. And then publicity is the other authority signal. So the same applies here. More is good, substantive is better. Now, generally speaking, the more high profile, the more impact that it's going to have. So if you're featured in your local news outlet, for example, that's great. If you're featured on Fox Business, that's exponentially better. Now, let's say you're a real estate agent. Being featured in Realtor Magazine could have even more effect than a big national publication. And the reason is it's a different level of vetting. So let's say somebody brings you on as a real estate expert to talk about something on Fox Business. They're going to do some degree of vetting, but they don't know as much about real estate as you or other people in your industry might. So they're not going to be able to vet you as well as another real estate agent, another professional in that industry, somebody who's at Realtor Magazine, for example, would be able to do. So if you say something that's not quite right, they're going to catch that a lot faster than Fox Business would. And that's just because of the nature, right? They understand the industry a lot better. They know details that other people don't know. So in cases like that, it may have more impact for you to be featured in a trade publication rather than a national outlet. So it's kind of one of those things where there's not a one-size-fits-all answer here. But generally speaking, the bigger, the more recognized, the more impact it will have for you. Now, like I said, within an industry, those trade publications are going to be very well recognized in that industry. So they'll have more impact in your industry, whereas something like Fox Business may be more impactful for, the typical home buyer, for example. And this segues pretty good in pretty well. Good God. This segues pretty well into our next topic, which when it comes to your media list, size really doesn't matter. All right. So I know some of you guys have heard that size doesn't matter. That is not true. Look, in this case, size doesn't matter. PR is not email marketing. This is not a numbers game. It's a relevance game. More importantly, it's a relationship game. So it's not simply a matter of getting as many journalists as you possibly can and emailing them all this same pitch. That's not going to increase your chances of getting featured. This is something I see a lot from both sides of the equation. I see it as a publicist because I watch people make these mistakes. I also see it as a journalist because I've got columns at numerous outlets. And so I receive a lot of pitches from other publicists, as well as, regular entrepreneurs who are DIYing it. What I see them do wrong is they will just look at an outlet and they'll see who writes for that outlet. And they'll just get all the email addresses because there's a lot of tools out there that provide this information, ranging from, small, inexpensive tools that anybody can afford all the way up to giant, massive enterprise level tools that PR agencies use that might cost, 5 figures a month. What happens is they'll get these email addresses, they'll build their massive list, and then they'll send the same generic pitch out to, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 journalists. And it's not relevant to 99% of them. I cannot tell you, and I see this happen in waves too. I don't know what that's about, but I see it happen in waves. So when I get them, like I just got a big wave of them recently over the last week or so. And I've got people pitching me everything from, diet stuff to social justice stuff to business stuff to, construction stuff, like just everything across the board, which makes zero sense because the only topics that I write about is public relations and marketing. That's pretty much it, right? It's all kind of self-encompassed under marketing as well, but I'm not writing anything that's not really a marketing topic. Occasionally I might write something veteran related, but for the most part, everything I'm writing is marketing related. But I will get a pitch about damn near any industry you can think of. And what these people are doing is they're just getting as many emails as they can and blasting it out, thinking that, well, if I just send it to enough people, somebody's going to cover it. And that's not good. It's not effective. What happens is you end up actually pissing off journalists. They'll probably end up blocking you in a lot of cases. I cannot tell you how many journalists or how many publicists I have actually blocked. And if enough people do that, your email deliverability starts going down. And now not only are people not interested in your emails, but in a lot of cases, they don't even see your emails anymore. So the bottom line is a journalist is not going to cover something that's not a fit for them right now. Doesn't matter how many times you email them. They have a particular topic they cover, like a general lane, so to speak, right? We call this a beat. Nothing outside of that matters. Now, I will give you a little bit of a caveat here. If you're kind of a genius at connecting the dots to get from point A to point C, then you can sometimes make that work. I had a great example of one that we recently did for a client who we needed to get his name out in a few different pieces pretty quickly because of some things that were going on. And we managed to connect, he's in the private equity world. We managed to connect the dots from private equity to personal finance, all the way down at the, individual level of the food chain when it comes to, economics, right? But because we could tie the stories together, we were able to get these articles featured in these outlets on not directly a topic that they were typically covering, right? It's important to remember here, though, you can stretch it too far. I try this occasionally, sometimes just kind of hoping that it will go through. In other cases, I'm doing it to kind of think of it like exercise, right? You're working your brain. You're trying to find ways to stretch that envelope, so to speak. And it's not something I generally recommend for most people. I do it because we do this stuff all day, every day. So I can push the envelope a little bit more. And typically, if I'm really pushing the edge, I'm doing it with a journalist that I already know very well. We've got a good personal relationship. We consider each other friends. So there's no ill will that's going to come out of it. I would not do that with a stranger. With a stranger, I'm going to pitch strictly inside their lane and nothing outside of that. Now, what you want to do here is you want to focus on fewer but more relevant journalists. And then you want to tailor each message to that journalist. So this might mean looking at some of the recent content they've created, looking into their background, looking for opportunities to connect other dots where there's now this kind of personal touch to it. And then continuously invest time in building and nurturing these relationships. So this is not going to have an immediate effect. This is going to be a long-term play. But over time, it does increase the likelihood of you getting your emails opened and getting responses. Great example of this is a story from a few years back where I had introduced a good friend of mine to a journalist that I knew here locally in Tampa. And she had pitched her a great story. It was perfect on all counts. It was the topics that she usually covers. It was very timely. People were already talking about this in the media. And I know that this journalist, this anchor, was actually looking for stories on that specific topic, right? But for whatever reason, it just didn't register. She pitched, she followed up, I think 2 times. And the publicist and I were talking probably about a month or so later. And I asked her how that turned out. And she told me that, well, it didn't really go anywhere. I pitched her, I followed up, and nothing happened. So look, this happens in this industry. A lot of times you'll pitch, everything will be great, but it goes nowhere. And that's not a reflection of you necessarily. Sometimes it's just circumstances. What ended up happening was I asked her if she wanted me to reach out to the journalist for her. And I did read her pitch, by the way. I read it and it was very well crafted. It was perfect. Like, I wouldn't have done anything differently. It was solid. So I then reached out to the journalist myself, and this was somebody I knew fairly well. So I just sent her a text message. Did not have all of the information that she had in her pitch. I just gave her a very concise, like, one sentence pitch, and then a thumbs up and a thumbs down emoji. And that's it. And she immediately said, I love it. Let's do it. Get me the details. And it wasn't because I did anything better or different or anything like that. It was because I had taken the time over a period of, 6 months to a year to build and establish that relationship. And so she was now a friend, and I could call her, I could text her, I could email her, whatever. She would recognize my messages and she would answer. And that's because of the relationship. So put the time into that, and that's going to have a huge impact for you. And then remember that a no is just a no right now. You can always pitch again. You could pitch at a different time. You could pitch with a different angle, but there's always going to be another opportunity. Now, do this within reason, right? If they say no today, it doesn't mean that it might be yes tomorrow, right? If you're going to be pitching the same story and there's no real substantive change to it, then you're probably going to want to wait a month, 3 months, whatever. But you could come back a little bit sooner with a different angle. Now, I still wouldn't do it right away. Maybe, a couple weeks later, a couple months later, whatever. But you can keep coming back to that same journalist from time to time. All right, so we're going to close out here with Jeremy's PR PSA. And for some reason, my graphic is not loading here. But if you do not have haters, you're not playing big enough. And what I mean by this is, I see so many people, they'll get out there and they'll be running a great company, but they're not out there as prolifically on social media, in the traditional media, on podcasts, as they could be, as they should be. And if they did that, they absolutely would take the company to the next level. They might grow exponentially. But with that comes the haters, the trolls, the people who are going to attack you and criticize you. And that's why a lot of people don't do it, right? They get out there, they dip their toe in the water, they try it a little bit, and then they start getting attacked. So they retreat back into their comfort zone. And that's such a huge mistake, because it takes you away from your real potential. You guys have an idea in your head as to what you want your company to be. You absolutely should not be letting these people who are going to criticize you hold you back from that, because that's really all they do. They criticize because they're not doing what you do. They're not taking the risks that you take. They're not putting in the work that you put in. And so you should never let the haters dictate what you're doing out there. All right, everyone. So this is a wrap for today. Hope you guys got a ton of value from this. If you did, I would love it if you'd invite some folks to the group. If you're already in the Facebook group, it's pretty easy to invite people in there. I want to give a quick shout out here to Deb. I think Deb was on with us here still this morning. I know she had a couple of meetings, but Chrissy is going to drop a link to Deb's virtual conference in the chat here on Facebook. If you guys have not already registered for this, you absolutely want to do that. There's a number of brilliant people in the entrepreneurial community sharing so much information that you guys can benefit from on all aspects of your business. Obviously, I'm talking about PR in there, but Jolene, who's a member of the community, is one of the speakers in there. I know she's on the chat with us right now. Lots of great people. This is free to register for, and we're probably going to be doing a little segment here at some point soon with Deb talking about her next summit that's coming up. She's always looking for great speakers. So I would encourage you guys to register for her free event. Make sure you pop in there. And she's got this cool thing where, you watch the whole event and whatnot, and that's totally free. If you want to download all the videos, There's a very nominal fee for that. And then you can actually save those and keep them and refer back to that information from now until the end of time. So great information there. And Deb is an awesome person and just a wealth of knowledge and connections. So I encourage you guys to go ahead and connect with her. Chrissy, if you could do me a favor and drop a link directly to Deb's LinkedIn and Facebook profiles as well, I would appreciate that. And so that'll be a wrap for it today. Good God, I cannot speak. That'll be a wrap for today, guys. I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode and talk to you soon.